Good morning. Welcome to Moores Creek National Battlefield in lovely southeastern North Carolina. I'm Ranger Adam, and behind the camera is Ranger Jason. And today we are going to talk about the longleaf pine tree and the reason that was the colony and the state of North Carolina #1 cash crop from between the 17 and 1800s. So as you see over here, this is a longleaf pine. Bet you can't guess why it's called a longleaf pine. Those are some really long needles. Now over here on the other side is a loblolly pine. As you can see, the needles are shorter. A couple of other differences are this is your standard pine cone that most everybody sees. That's from the loblolly. This is what the pine cone of the longleaf pine looks like. It's a little larger. So why was the longleaf pine so important to the colony and the state of North Carolina? Well, when we first colonized the area, we had forests of these longleaf pines that stretched from the southeastern seaboard all the way to Texas. On the eastern seaboard, we have we did decimate just about the entire population of longleaf pines. Now here in North Carolina, over towards the middle of the state, there is the oldest known longleaf pine in the state, which is a little over 400 years old, and it's in a state park. Now, again, why was this our cash crop? So these trees grew between 100 and 150 feet tall and really straight. And the United Kingdom, or Britain, built a lot of ships. Ships back then were made from wood. So, as you can see behind me, there are plenty of pine trees. Most of these are loblollies, but you can see how big they get. We cut that down and we saw it up into planks and we built a ship with it. Now there are a few other things. How many people have ever fallen down and skint their knee? You bleed just a little bit and it kind of makes a scab and stops the bleeding, right? Well, pine sap or pine resin is the same thing. This is a bottle of pine sap, pine resin, or crude turpentine. Now turpentine, once it is made, is used to make disinfectants, make cleaners, make medicine, and later on in the 1800s it was used in the production of rubber. So we would start out with gouging a face about 12 inches wide and about 20 inches tall, and they would be cut into V's. And down at the bottom, originally they would cut a small box into the tree. They would just notch it out and dig it out, and that's where the sap would run. Later, they started using buckets and kind of like getting maple syrup. If you've ever seen that, they tap the trees and they put the bucket on there to get the sap. That's essentially what we're doing here. But they put the buckets down and have little metal gutters or wood gutters. And they're kind of focused down so that everything drips right into that bucket. Now, the difference between my crude turpentine and spirits of turpentine is once we get all of this, and somewhere out here in the woods we would probably have large wooden barrels. They would be dumping this into it. They would probably heat it up to begin with, dump it in there, and let it harden. Now here in eastern North Carolina, the roads were not that good. Our main, or our biggest way of getting stuff to commerce to different parts were on the rivers. They were called the Blackwater highways around here. So we would take these barrels and we'd roll them onto barges, and they would take them about 25 miles down to Wilmington, where they would actually start. They had turpentine distilleries. So they would take this and they would put it into big copper kettles, and they would heat it up. Coming off the top of this copper kettle were some copper coils, and as everything heated up, the moisture or water and part of the turpentine would go through the condensing coils, and what came out was actually the spirit of turpentine. So if any of you have ever seen the moonshiners or something like that, they have the still where they're distilling what they are, and then they have the cooling coils running off. The setup is almost exactly the same. So the sludge that is left in the bottom is called rosin. Now, rosin was sometimes used to either waterproof leather, or at the time we had lye soap, which was basically water soaked in wood ash and animal fat. And that was really, really caustic. If you actually washed your hands with just that, it would eat the skin up. It would hurt. So the rosin actually helped to mellow everything out and made it smell a little better, made it smell like a pine tree. So if any of you have not ever seen a pine tree or pine sap, this is a large glob, and it's still somewhat pliable. So you can see, and it's nice and golden, but this can actually be squished up, moved around, and if we heated this up, this is where we would start getting the turpentine. Underneath it is that's just a piece of bark. But this is very flammable. So, and that leads us into part of the other things that we would do with pine trees. So we would make tar and pitch. A lot of people probably know that tar was used to surface the roads. Here in North Carolina, we're known as the Tar Heels, and some legends say it's because of what we were doing in the 1700s. Because here in eastern North Carolina, most people would have been barefoot, especially out here in the woods, and the tar would have stuck to their feet. So what we do is we take the wood. Actually, let me show you. So we would take And this is what would be known as light wood, lighter wood, fat wood. All it is pine that the sap has actually soaked into the wood. Smells really good, smells like a nice pine tree. But what we're trying to do is get the sap or the tar out of this. So to do that, we actually have to burn it without it catching fire. Get a large area, make a large circle, and around here, if you can find the clay, they would actually make a base of clay. And then they would take between 2 and 4 foot long logs of pine, and they would lay them like a wagon wheel. And they would do that in a couple of different layers. And then they would start them on fire. They would cover that with dirt, straw, straw, then dirt, and kind of leave almost a chimney on top and they would keep the fire going. But inside that, there's either a hollow log or a pipe that runs from the middle down to where outside of the burn pit where they have a bucket. And as everything is burning and condensing inside the tar kiln, what's coming out is the tar. Now, if we take that tar and we heat it up even more, we get rid of the majority of the moisture out of it, then it becomes tar pitch. Now, tar was used to slick your hair back. They used it for cosmetics. Some of you have probably heard of tar and feather, which is something you did to someone in the community that had done something everyone else disagreed with. So they would warm up the tar, put it on them, and then put feathers on them. Kind of hard to get off. But it was also used in medicine to cauterize wounds or to seal those wounds also. And if there was an amputation, they would put it on the end, and it was to not only stop the bleeding, but to help prevent infection. It might have worked a little bit, we don't know. But that was your tar. Now with the pitch, which is what was left over after it was heated up again, that was used in shipbuilding. So like we were talking about out here with the long pine trees and the boards, as they're laying all these boards on top of each other and trying to build that up. They're laying everything like this. Now, that's going to leak a lot. So what they would do is take rope and soak it in the pitch, and then they would drive it between the different boards that were used in the shipbuilding. So we do have, and I did fail to bring it out, I do have some pitch that was found about 30 miles east of here off of a shipwreck. And the boards are still there, but all we have are some of the pitch that was left to waterproof it. We will get a picture of it and we'll put it on this video. But that's about it for the tar and the pitch and the turpentine. Now, we're just going to kind of segue a little bit into hopefully our next video, which is going to be about why we do controlled burns here. And if you look behind me, you can see that we had a controlled burn here about 2 months ago. Prior to 1900-ish, Mother Nature took care of that. We had lightning strikes that would start fires, and it would burn. The fires would burn until it hit a natural boundary, like a river, and it couldn't get across, so it would stop. Now, once the U.S. Forestry Service came about, and most of you folks know who Smokey Bear is, and he would stand there in his nice flat hat and say, "Only you can prevent forest fires." And the only problem with that is that by not allowing burns, everything builds up underneath it. So we have a large, what they call fire load. And when that catches fire, it's not just a quick blow through. It's a sustained burn that kills just about everything in there. It doesn't allow the mature trees to actually stay. So we'll be discussing that in one of our future videos. But thank you very much for joining us today, and have a lovely day.